Hey guys, what's going on? It's your boy RJ Game News USA here, back today with another video, and today we're going to react to Cody Leach's review of the movie Backrooms. So if you like this kind of content, like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. And before we react to this clip, let me go ahead and tell you guys what I think of Backrooms, and also what audiences are saying, what critics are saying. So the critic score is around a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is very good. And the audience score has dipped a little bit below that. It's in the 70 percentile, which to me always indicates, hey, a lot of people could have seen this movie, but audiences didn't love it as much as the critics do. So they were sort of sold into going to see it. In fact, this is one of the best-selling, if not the best-selling, A24 film of all time. So by all metrics, it's a success. Even that audience score isn't bad at a 70-something percent. And a 90-something percent on Rotten Tomatoes is pretty good as well. But, that being said, I did not love the movie nearly as much as the critics did. I still think it's a serviceable movie. I still think it's a fine movie. And we'll get into the deeper criticisms and positives as we go through this clip. But overall, I gave the movie a 7 out of 10. I was left feeling like they could have done a lot more with it. And anyway, without further ado, let's see what Cody has to say and we'll respond.
Well, this weekend we've got the release of Backrooms, the long-awaited sequel to critically acclaimed film Backshots. I'm kidding. Don't Google that.
That joke landed flat, by the way.
What is up, guys? Welcome to my full review of Backrooms, the latest in a pretty horror-packed month that was May, and also the latest YouTuber-turned-filmmaker directing effort. And this is a film based off of the creepypasta that went viral maybe like 15, 16 years ago. These pictures of these like uncomfortably empty and like yellow-filtered rooms. And also the web series that was created by the director of this film, Kane Parsons, on his YouTube channel. And the basic concept of this movie is that you have a character played by Chiwetel Ejiofor who is a struggling alcoholic and recently divorced, and he discovers in the basement of his struggling furniture business that there is this little portal that enters this extra-dimensional area called the Backrooms, which are these very off and almost disorienting version.
By the way, I will say about the real backroom stuff, like the internet meme culture, liminal spaces, you know, creepypasta stuff, I'm sort of into that. I sort of like that. You know, both audio creepypasta, but in this case, more of a visual creepypasta of the backrooms. Like, I think it works. I just think trying to stretch that out into a full-length feature maybe didn't land quite as well as a concept.
Versions of real-life rooms. These empty, seemingly endless labyrinth of rooms filled with various types of...
By the way, side note, we've been eating really good in the month of May when it comes to horror movies. We had Hokum, which was excellent. We had Obsession. And Obsession is also one that, you know, is made with a really small budget, just like Backrooms was, just like a bunch of these movies were. And Passenger, which, you know, again, is another sort of like internet sort of like hitchhiker thing that got stretched out to a full movie. I like that more than the critics, and I actually give that movie a 9 out of 10. And so I flipped with the critics a little bit more on that one and liked it a lot more than the critics did. So, but because I thought I had a lot more going on with it than Backrooms did, because you could drive to other locations and do other things. But Backrooms is still, you know, if it's the 4th best horror movie in 2026, then you had a really good fucking month, put it that way.
Of furniture. Now, I have no experience at all with the creepypasta. I had never seen any of Kane Parsons' web series about this.
Of course, if you go by the critic scores, I think it's the 3rd. I think Hokum, Obsession, and Backrooms were all 90 plus on Rotten Tomatoes.
And honestly, I didn't even really know the premise of the movie. Like, I had seen snippets from the teasers. Of course, I had seen a few advertisements on social media and the title of the film. So I kind of had a little bit of an idea, like, experience-wise, what I was in for. Other than that, walked into this one pretty blind, as I try to with any horror film. And starting off with the positives, the main thing that I was extremely impressed by and walking out just really being curious of how the hell they did this was the set design. Like, this is a film that, I'll go ahead and let you know now, is not exactly my cup of tea. It's not necessarily something that I would revisit, but even with that being said, I would happily watch like a 3-hour documentary behind-the-scenes featurette on how the fuck they made this thing, because the whole concept of having this seemingly endless maze and labyrinth of these rooms, and every single one that you go into is shaped and crafted and built a little bit different, little tiny details of it getting more and more off from what we know to be a actual, like, efficiently made room, furniture that seemingly looks normal but is just arranged in a weird way, and then starting to be arranged in an even more weird way as they go through it, and even like bleeding into the walls and bleeding into the floor in certain spots. There's even areas where there's like full running water and pipes and plumbing and swimming pools, and I just want to know how the fuck they made this thing, because the more that I was experiencing these different rooms, I'm like, how much time did this shit take? I have to assume they found like this massive abandoned office building or like a garage structure or something like that that had like the space for 6 or 7 of these rooms, and they would just film them and then completely scrap them and start over and redress them for the next segment of the movie. I don't exactly know, but the way that it was crafted, the way that it was designed, and even the way that it was edited together to look like one continuous like journey through all these different rooms was really well done. And you got to give a lot of that credit to the director, Kane Parsons.
Yeah, I agree with that so far. Like, I think me and Cody are going to agree a lot in this review, because he did end up giving it a 3 out of 5, which is to stream it on his, and I think he has it slightly lower than me. I think it's more like a 3.5 out of 5, or in my scale, a 7 out of 10, which means just good enough that it's a good movie to go see in theaters. 7 out of 10 and over is good enough for the theater, in my opinion.
This is not one of those times where there was this weird little niche viral thing that some studio at some point got a hold of, whether it actually had rights or like most of them is just totally public domain. And they said, that's popular, that's got an audience out there. Just give it to some writer and director and let's form some kind of story around it and sell it. This isn't one of those times. This is a guy who had a whole web series really trying to like visualize and bring some kind of a video experience to these still photographed creepypastas. And so this is a guy that already had a vision, already had an idea of what this is supposed to be, and now he just has a chance to make it into a feature-length experience. And for a film that is very much trying to be more of like experiential horror, not necessarily something that's more narrative-driven, just visual disorientation, something that's supposed to like make you feel off, something that's supposed to get some emotions out of you just by the images that you're watching and even some of the sound design, you have to have a very tight grip on what exactly you're trying to do.
It's kind of like Undertone, except Undertone did it with audio. Backrooms is trying to do it with visuals. Just things that look weird. Things that look off.
Convey, and how exactly you're going to craft that experience with the pacing, with the color grading, with even the different filmmaking styles, which most of which in this movie is just traditional filmmaking, but there's also some found footage aspects in here. And as somebody that oftentimes doesn't really become that enamored with found footage, I actually found those segments of the movie to be the most effective. Having a tight grip and a very distinct vision on how all those different aspects of this are going to come together, that makes for a really talented director. So whether or not this is exactly my type of thing or not, I see the talent here. I see all the potential, and Kane Parsons is now the latest, and luckily a long string of recent successes and recent really cool efforts of seeing YouTubers actually making horror films, and making successful horror films at that. The acting all across the board is really good. This is a very small cast, only like 4 or 5 characters here. The predominant force here is Chiwetel Ejiofor. He's basically the main character of the film for the most part. He's the one that, if anybody here has somewhat of an arc, and so he's definitely the one that most of your attention is kind of focused on.
Again, the lack of narrative-driven, like, elements is what hold this movie back. I think you could have had narrative-driven elements and still had everything that's also in the movie at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think the two had to be mutually exclusive. I think that's the Backroom's biggest problem.
I mean, I've never seen that guy give anything but a great performance, but his character here is pretty unhinged, you know, in a real understandable and kind of relatable way at first, somebody that's just in emotional turmoil. And as he goes throughout the film and starts to experience more of the weirdness and the disorientation and the what the fuckery of the Backrooms, becomes steadily more unhinged as the story goes along. And the last thing that I'll say here that I really enjoyed is that this is a movie that goes for like a vintage 90s vibe to it.
Like that.
I'm pretty sure it is set in the early 90s. It never really spells it out for you. You don't get like a time code. I don't think there was any references to what year it was in, and I appreciated that. But as you watch it, I mean, you start to have these visual context clues where you're like, okay, they're all watching tube TVs. All right, there's a VHS player. I'm not really seeing any cell phones. That commercial looks exactly like something I saw all the time as a kid. It's a little uncomfortable for me to refer to the early 90s as vintage. It makes me feel old.
I understand. I mean, I completely understand, dude. But the bottom line is this. It's not actually vintage. Technically, retro is 20 years. 20 to 40 years. Vintage is 40 and up. So everything that's 1986 and older is vintage. Now, classical is anything 60 years and up. And then antique is 80 and up. So, for example, the year, now, believe it or not, the year 2006 and under, or over, is retro. Everything 1986 and earlier is vintage, and everything that is 1966 and earlier is classical, and everything 1946 and earlier is antique. So that's, you go 20, 40, 60, 80 year differences. That's what you'll notice too with certain rock music. Certain music will be referred to as vintage or retro. Video games, certain consoles and games will be considered retro, vintage. Same with movies, right? So, for example, I know I'm belaboring the point, but for example, a movie like The Blair Witch Project is now considered retro. But it's not vintage. Vintage would be Halloween. But Halloween isn't considered classical. It is a classic, but it's not considered classical. Classical would be like Psycho. Antique would be Citizen Kane. You get what I'm saying? So, and by the way, this isn't like a hard definition. It's just kind of like loosely how people refer to things like that.
But the aesthetic that they're going for here with that early 90s vibe is very much a vintage flavor. And I think for the more analog and liminal space type style
it's
they're
retro.
going for with this movie, having that vintage 90s vibe as the setting here really amplifies all that. Moving on to the mix, and I'm not going to say anything specific whatsoever here, but I wasn't really satisfied with the climax, the ending of this movie. And the reason why I'm not putting that in the negative...
I agree that the ending, I don't want to spoil it, but the ending to me is very flat. And I think this movie would have benefited greatly from a better ending.
Is because I don't really know what a proper ending for this movie would be.
Again,
maybe it doesn't have a proper ending. Maybe that's...
I agree. Even when you first start the movie, you're like, is there a good way this ends? Because usually when I think about a movie, I think, how can this end satisfyingly? And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But when I looked at this movie from the jump, I'm like, there is no great ending for this that I could foresee.
The entire point, maybe that is exactly what they were going for, is that this isn't structured in a way where you're supposed to walk away with some kind of satisfaction. You're supposed to walk away with big question marks and not feel like you got any answers. I don't know what the proper ending that would make the movie more satisfying for me would be. I don't really think that I would want an ending that gives you a lot of answers and spells out a lot of the lore for the Backrooms, because I just feel like it would take away from the mystery. But at the same time, an ending that doesn't bother with giving you any answers also isn't exactly satisfying.
Exactly.
The ending you get here is somewhere in the middle, but it just didn't really feel like a climax that we were building up to. It didn't feel like there was some kind of a plot satisfaction or a character arc satisfaction or anything that feels like we're ending the journey of this movie, the movie just kind of stops. And I was like, oh, okay, movie's over. And now moving on to the negatives.
Right, I
I've
don't
kind
like
of
that.
hinted at it before now, but this is a film that is very much going for the experience, the visuals, the vibe, the aesthetic. It's not a narratively driven film. It's not even a character driven film. Now, as I said,
And
Chiwetel
again,
Ejiofor, his character.
if you're saying a movie is not a narrative film, if it's not a character film, it's got a cap on it. It can only be so good in my book. You know what I'm saying? I think that cap is a 7 out of 10.
As somewhat of an arc. I don't really feel like it's this big, like, overarching journey as a character, but that there's something there. But this is not a movie where you start the first act with some problem, some kind of an issue the character is trying to overcome, and then we're going to watch for the next 90 minutes as they either succeed or fail in doing that. It's just giving you a reason to get you into the back rooms and then letting you experience the back rooms. And I think that's exactly what they were going for. I don't think that was accidental. I don't think that was an oversight. I think that's exactly what Kane was going for. And the people that will latch into this are really going to love that. This is a movie that's going to find its audience. But I also think it's a movie that's going to be very divisive because there are a lot of people out there like myself that go to the movies for story and characters first. And it takes a very specific and special type of film that doesn't bother itself.
Exactly what I was just saying. If a movie's got to be story and characters first, for the most part. You know what I mean? And this lacks that a bit.
That still can find a way to be ultimately satisfying. I don't know if I can say that about Backrooms. I think it's well made. I think that it is very well executed for what they're going for. Just not exactly my type of horror film. Let me give you a good old-fashioned Cody Leach food analogy. The experience of Backrooms is like somebody serving me a well-made pizza that doesn't have any sauce on it, which is my favorite part of the pizza. The cheese might be great, the meat might be really well cooked, the dough recipe might be on point, but as good as it might be, I'm still going to walk away mostly focusing on the fact that, I really wish I would have had some sauce. And the only other thing that I would say here is that this is a very deliberately paced film, and not having like a narrative drive to kind of hook you in and just being a visually driven experience. There are certain spots in the movie where I think it might be a bit of a drag for some audiences. It might be testing their patience a little bit.
That did happen to me, and that's part of the problem with making this a feature-length film. What was the runtime on Backrooms? Hold on a second. So 1 hour and 45 minutes. I still think that's too long for this style of movie. I think you have to go like super bare minimum here. Like 85 minutes, like Woman in the Yard style, which I know Cody Leach more than anybody hates Woman in the Yard. That's where me and him have a huge disagreement because I actually like Woman in the Yard. I think Woman in the Yard is the 7 out of 10 for me also. And I think Woman in the Yard is slightly better than this movie, if that makes sense. And critics hated that movie. And I think Woman in the Yard has a lot of the same problems that Backrooms has, as far as the, a little bit of the lack of structure. But where I think it is better than the Backrooms, there's lack of structure, and yes, there's definitely some dull points, and there's a lot of leaning on visuals, and a lot of taking what could have been a shorter concept and having to stretch it out. But I think I appreciate a lot more than Cody Leach. I appreciated the ending of The Woman in the Yard more, and I appreciated a little more of The Woman in the Yard in general than I did Backrooms. But they're both about a 7 out of 10 movie in my book. Backrooms could have been about 20 minutes shorter and cut out a little bit of the fluff, and I think no one would have been crying over it. That being said, what do I know? They were successful.
There was like a 10-minute period there where I found myself kind of struggling not to doze off. The movie did kind of get me hooked very soon after that, so it picks back up, but for a movie that doesn't really have like these driving factors that are going to catch your attention if you're not just captivated by visuals and some of the unease of the structures of these rooms, it might be a little bit of a big ask for some people and their patience levels. Overall, what I'll say about Backrooms is that this is a movie that I think you can tell pretty easily based off of your own knowledge of what your movie taste is, whether this is for you or not for you. If you're somebody that likes analog horror, creepypasta, something that's a little bit more experiential, similar to Skinamarink, there's way more going for this movie, I think, than Skinamarink, but they're cut from the same cloth, something that's just like visual disorientation and abstract and surrealist images. If that appeals to you and you're like, fuck yeah, that's my brand of horror, go out this weekend, check this thing out, absolutely support it. But if you're unsure, or if you have a very similar taste to me and hearing a movie that is not character or story driven just kind of loses your interest, I think you're okay to at least wait till streaming, or maybe just skip this outright.
Alright, that'll conclude the clip. Yeah, he does recommend to stream it. I always say 7 out of 10 is an either or. Stream it or go to the movies. Like, it's pretty neutral. Like, 7 out of 10 to me is the most neutral score you could give something. To me, that's like average. I know if they say 5 out of 10 is supposed to be average. No one fucking grades that way. Think about how gamers grade, right? But no, 7 out of 10 is average. It's like a C minus average in school. You know what I mean? It's give and take. It's give or take a little bit. It's like, it's not like, if you miss it because you had stuff going on this weekend, who cares? Go stream it. If you want to wait for streaming, that's fine. It's not a must-see. You know what I mean? Like, 9 and above is our must-see movies. 8 is like, you probably should go see it in the movies. 7 is like, you could take it either way. 6 and lower, don't waste your money in the movies, right? That's how I always feel with it. So again, I mean, we've had a busy month of May in horror. If you haven't been there every single weekend for a horror movie, and you need to catch up on some of the better ones, like in my opinion, Passenger, and obviously Obsession and Hook'em are better, then I would catch up on those before I'd bother watching the Backrooms. But it could be a movie that's for you, if you're specifically interested in it. But anyway, that's going to conclude this video, guys. Thank you for watching. Let me know if you saw the Backrooms in theaters, and if so, what did you think of it? But for now, this is RJ signing out. Have a good one.